Welcome to Your Trust Deck, a podcast by GGWP, where I talk with operators, engineers, and policy leaders about how trust and safety works in practice. I'm your host, Joy Podgorny, and this episode we are joined by Laura Higgins from Roblox. Hello, and today we have one of my dear friends within the field, Laura Higgins from Roblox, but I would like you to tell us a little bit about how you describe yourself.
Thanks, Joy. Well, firstly, thank you so much for inviting me on. I can't wait for our conversation. So as Joy said, I'm Laura Higgins. I am the Senior Director of Community Safety and Civility at Roblox. My work at Roblox really is on the safety side. Originally, when I first started, it was a brand new project. We were building out media literacy, digital citizenship, and thinking about how we could really build confidence in all of our stakeholders, so parents and kids and teens, in how to navigate both Roblox but the online world safely. I'm really happy to say we've grown our team, and I'm sure we'll probably talk about some of that growth in a little while. So we now have people who are really focused on youth and parents. So I'm very much focused on kind of safety partnerships and working cross-functionally internally with all of our safety teams as well. My background before coming to Roblox was I was the online safety operations manager at the UK Safer Internet Centre. So I set up and founded and ran all of our helpline operations. So I actually came from the victim support side, people who'd experienced online harms, and was then able to bring that experience into Roblox. And so now really kind of evolving that role as like having a tech focus, but really having that empathy and still maintaining those relationships with civil society. But yeah, I've been a do-gooder all of my life, Joy. That's it in a summary.
I confine my do-gooding to my work, so that's how I get away with that. So, but I'm guilty of that as well. I think it would be great every time that I'm out in the wild, whether it's at an industry conference, but usually it's in more mixed audiences or general audience sort of things. Someone finds out that I have a background in kids entertainment, whether it's video games or doing the interactive pieces for cartoons and toys, and they say, "Oh, like Roblox. Do you know what's going on at Roblox?" And I always say, I know many people on that team, and they're good friends, and they're really great people within the field. But I think it would be really helpful to talk about a little bit about what the composition of your team looks like as far as the audience care, audience management sort of side. There's trust and safety, of course, but even trust and safety has so many dynamics to it.
Yeah, absolutely. So my team actually sits within the legal and advocacy team, which makes sense, I think, because we sit very closely with government relations and public policy. My team, I would say, is very much a public facing. We're out on the road, we're going to conferences, we're engaging with the community. And also with the partnerships, as I mentioned, with civil society. So we're there kind of both helping to share updates about Roblox, but really listening, I think, is a core piece of what my team does. We consider ourselves advocacy very much. So the civility element is one piece of what we do, but we're advocating both for our internal community, but also for all these other kind of stakeholders. So as I say, my team, we now have going back. So we onboarded Daniel. He's our man Friday. We could not survive without him. He keeps the ship sailing, and I'm so grateful that we have him there. We carried out a project with the Digital Wellness Lab. Gosh, must be 4 years ago now, where we ran workshops across time zones with industry, with academia, with child health experts, with young people themselves, NGOs, etc. Brought everyone together with a hypothesis that we wanted to make online spaces more safe and civil in 5 years. And what would we have to do? What policies, what tech, and what education would be needed? And we were really strict, like, hey, we know platforms, we know that you're creating these tools. Nothing's working, nothing's changing. How do we get really innovative? Like, what's going to really push the needle? And we came together, we actually held a day in Harvard and brought all the experts together and kind of picked what we felt were the key things that came out of it. And number one was meaningful youth participation. If you build things for young people, they have to have a seat at the table. You have to give them a voice and listen. and really put them at the center. So we onboarded the wonderful Andres. He's been with us for a few years now, and he leads on all of our youth engagement. So he runs the Roblox Teen Council, for example. We're now in our second cohort. And I can't say too much, but we'll be rolling out some more international boards very soon. We really want to make sure that we're not just sort of focused on North America, for example, but really trying to bring in those different voices to represent our community. But we also work with other youth peer advocacy organizations on different projects. And then most recently, again, similar vein, what's the other key audience for Roblox is parents. So we are really happy that she's been with us nearly a year now, Dr. Elizabeth Malovados, who is very well known internationally as a digital parenting expert. So she joined us. She's just launched her parent council. She's got 80 parents from 30 countries. And, just also we have parent champions. So there were so many people wanting to get involved who were really amazing people. We couldn't have everyone on these calls and still make it manageable. So these are like keep informed. They're still going to be advocates for us, but we will keep them up to date ahead of time of changes and things like that. So we've just started having those first meetings, and the range of people that we have on them, we literally have got people from the tech industry, people who are child development experts, educators, but they are parents with an interest in Roblox as well. So it's going to be really interesting. Some of the sort of topics that they're doing, back to the whole infrastructure at Roblox. Matt Kaufman, he's our head of safety. He's fantastic, and he just did an AMA with the Teen Council, which was fantastic. It got 5 out of 5 rating from the teens. They just felt so valued having that real personal time with somebody so senior as Matt. And they all learned so much. They were fantastic. And I know that Matt really enjoyed that session as well. He's actually going to be meeting with some of our parent council in person when he comes over for a conference to the UK in a couple of weeks. We're actually holding an event where he's going to be face to face with parents. And I think that speaks volumes about the transparency and how valued that relationship really is. In terms of the whole organization, it's quite interesting. I think people assume I sit within the safety organization. I sit adjacent, and I think that's quite a deliberate decision, because I can then be independent of the actual safety team. I can still advocate for their work and externally. But I think when it comes to those conversations with regulators or NGOs, there's a different level of a conversation. I'm not just seen as, you work in trust and safety, therefore this is your stance. I can talk to them on a slightly different level, in the same way that I'm not in the public policy team, because sometimes that can just be seen as, you're the policy person, you're the first line of defense, therefore we don't trust you. So I think my team, Tammy as well, I think we are kind of human face, really, when we're out and talking. That said, because particularly with my background and just the growth of how things work, so we have numerous different teams within safety. So we have moderation teams, we have trust and safety teams, we have safety policy teams, we have critical harms, and that includes analysts who are doing kind of really deep dive specialist work on some of the really tough topics. Matt oversees the whole org. He's got a huge team of people that he's responsible for. But they really value, I think, the inputs that we bring from the outside world, because whilst you're heads down and you're dealing with the day-to-day things that you're seeing, as well as trying to, evolve tools and review things and make sure that we're, as I say, doing those deep dives on big topics, making sure that we're ahead of the curve. You can kind of become quite polarized and like, this is just Roblox. And sometimes it's healthy, I think, to go, hey, this is what we're hearing from the helplines, because this is actually what kids are experiencing. Maybe it's not something we're getting reports on at Roblox, but it's still something we should be aware of because it's a real thing. So yeah, I'm really lucky that I get to have all those different conversations across the infrastructure, but it's huge, it's vast and always growing.
Yeah. And I mean, as someone who has worked with small teams, like had been embedded in small teams, has been embedded in large teams, has done it in the consulting role with all of them, I think it's really great that you have the opportunity to have an external relationship with the audience and have that face to the external audience. I know a lot of people out there have to wear all of those hats in very small teams, and so you have that opportunity. But at the same time, you do have that audience, you do have that volume, you do have that scale, and so it makes sense that you would have to prioritize like dedicated team members and dedicated resources to that sort of thing. Um, it's not always rainbows and lollipops in on any community, but also at Roblox. So I know you guys have had some, you know, public moments that have come up in the news and stuff like that. Um, how how do you work with the audience, especially in your role, in your very frontline external audience facing? How do you gain back that trust in a lot of the stakeholders, like parents, like um, teachers and educators, and that sort of thing, when there's a lot of the media that's kind of pushing a very different narrative than what I'm sure you have on your team, you see on your team?
Yeah. I mean, that's a great question. Thank you, Joy. And it's been a tough time. We have had a huge amount of scrutiny, and a lot of negative press. And I think it's okay to kind of just clear that off. We're not sticking our head in the sand. We acknowledge the perception, and it's really hard for us because we know it's not reflective of what's really happening. What is really interesting is, when people see us and we get in front of them, they're so relieved. Firstly, they're just like, oh, you're real people. We didn't even imagine that there were real people. Because at the same time, they're hearing all about AI automation and this problem, and they're just like, oh, well, we just assumed it was all this. It's like, no, we're real people with real experience, real skills. We really care deeply about this stuff. So I think that's the first thing, is reassuring, and then turning up, like being there, being present. Let's have a difficult conversation. If you've got questions, if you've got things you want to talk about, that really goes a long way. We also have a dedicated law enforcement team who are just out engaging with, whether it's Interpol or Europol, FBI, or whether it's small local police forces. They're out on the road, and we just hear overwhelmingly how reassuring it is. It is an opportunity to kind of go, if this, then that. Like, here is how our tools work. Here's how to make reports. You're frustrated because you submitted a report, but it didn't go the right way. It's because you didn't actually use the dedicated portal that we have that would, now you know about it. And they're so happy, and it really helps to build and strengthen those relationships. So that's the first thing, I think, is just being really genuine, not shying away from it. It's just to kind of go, look, we know that you have questions. We know that you have things you want to tell us. We're going to come and listen and authentically listen. We can't do everything that everyone wants us to do. Quite often, we're actually halfway towards it, or have already got some of those things they're asking for, that they don't know that we have some of these tools, or that we have a team that's working on these problems. So again, it's just bridging that gap. It's a shame that the biggest way that reaches audiences, being the media, are not collaborative. Many times we've had really amazing projects or launches of a tool that would really help parents, for example. No media wants to talk about that. We'll get no pickup. We do fantastic research with external organizations on different topics. No media wants to talk about that. They just like to report on either a negative story, or what's actually been happening most lately is just rehashing old stories, or just throwing the word Roblox into a story that's nothing to do with us, when you actually read the body of the story, because it's just getting them the headlines and it's getting them the attention. And it's really hard. But, I think where we're at, we're optimistic as a company. We believe in our mission. We believe in what we're doing. We take criticism where it's due. We're always iterating. We're always launching new things. We're always working on tools. Sometimes, we're very slow and thoughtful when we launch things. There's a real process that goes in place. We're not just like, do it overnight. But there are some things where we're like, okay, this is a fair comment. Let's see how quickly we can, turn this bit around. And so there is just a will always to be better, to improve. We're not defensive. It's like, scrutiny's fair. We are absolutely huge. We have over 144 million TAUs. You know, we're bigger than a lot of countries in the world. So we realize that comes with a lot of responsibility, and we take that very seriously. But it feels a bit unfair sometimes. But it's when we get the opportunity to scale that reach in the community, and actually in the moment, I will say, like, the trust and safety community has been interesting. But just one anecdote, I had the opportunity. We'd heard that there was a school in the UK that had some issues with kids falling out on Roblox, and she'd published a newsletter that had gone viral with the parents, and it ended up coming to my team, like, because it had a lot of misinformation in it about what was available to parents, and so I was like, would you like a conversation? And the head teacher of the school was so happy to talk to me. And she's like, I feel confident. I found all these resources that you have because I didn't know they were there. And that's on us. We need to always be better at getting them in the hands of the parents and the educators. But she's like, I've got some guidance I can give the parents now. And also, I didn't realize you had all of these learning experiences. I'm going to go off and play with my family. And it was just so joyful. And if we can only scale that, then I think we're really going to be winning. So that's not, eventually that's where I'd love us to be. So we are doing lots of work with kind of the big umbrella organizations with the hope that that will trickle down. But as I say, the other community, like you mentioned when you're out talking to our, mutual friends, reputations can fall based on rumor, I would say. And we have definitely seen people who, know me personally, suddenly are kind of regurgitating a news story that they've read. And they might still caveat it with, oh, we know people, we know that they've got good people, but Roblox bad, Roblox this. And it's like, firstly, come and ask me. Like, you trust me, we work in the same space. There's a conversation to be had, but also you're now part of the problem. But you should know better. Like, you work in the same space. You also work in the tech industry or the safety tech industry, and you understand that probably a lot of what's being talked about may not be accurate, or at least if you are going to quote it, then fact check first, because it makes it really difficult, and it can be quite hurtful, I guess, for those of us who really are trying to do good. When it's like, oh, it almost feels like friends are talking about you behind your back, and it's like, are you doing it for clout? Come on, you know better. So, when it's deserved, it's deserved.
I've more than a couple times pinged you or other friends on the side in a DM and like, do you see this? Have you talked to so and so at the place? Whether it's Roblox or any other place. Like I see it because we know I mean, it is a small community, the trust and safety community. We know either the person who is taking the brunt of that from the crisis, or we know someone who knows someone, or someone who was at that with that team before. And so, yeah, I think it is right. Giving the benefit. I always tell my teams to live in benefit of the doubt land until you're
Mhm.
forced to not to be in benefit of the doubt land, until you are given exact evidence that it's not a good place to be. So I agree that's a good one. What like I said, like I'm constantly having parents come, like it's this conundrum that I see a lot when they're like, I don't know what to do for my kid. And there's literally a sea, an ocean of resources out there. Every site, I mean, giant sites like yourself have tomes of information and archival stuff that has been happening. But I mean, I've been doing kids safety online for 25 years now. I wrote stuff 25 years ago. Most of it's still valid. Obviously, some of it's tweaked now, but like this is not new learning. Some of the people who are parents who are coming to me were kids on my sites that I was running 25 years ago. So like a lot of these like are canon kind of facts that we live by, but still I think when parents find themselves in that panic moment, they shut down and they freeze and they have no ability. And we were just at you and I were just at a workshop with peers within the field and peers within the education and safety space. And everybody was talking about how do we get the word out? How do we get the education? How do we teach the public about that sort of stuff? And I know you guys are doing great stuff with your advisory boards, but like what, what comments do you have about that that we can forward on to every parent that we know?
Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I agree, the resources that I wrote all those years ago, they had the same messaging, maybe just updated a little, but it's not about blaming parents. We know they are busy, they are overwhelmed. And as you say, there is so much misinformation or confusing information. And then, it's fascinating, particularly for our platform. We see a lot of people turn to social media and like, my kid wants to go onto Roblox. What would you do? And then you just see, it's like half of them are like, I've read this in the news. You should never let them on it. And then that's counteracted with people who literally are doing all the good advice we would give them, like co-play with your kids, especially when they're little. Teach them, learn together on how to report. Make sure you use the settings that are there, and it's lovely when they're just like, me and my kid play all the time and it's brilliant. And my older one, we used to play together, but they play on their own now. But, and they're like, the tools are there. And so it's really interesting sometimes. It's like watching this counter narrative piece and, that's really interesting and quite reassuring. So yeah, I think none of us are hitting the mark on reaching parents. There's more we can do. One of the things we've been doing is literally research with our parents around how do we get better at amplifying this, because we're lucky we have this really engaged parent council, but they can only amplify so much. So it's about still trying to be creative, trying to get out there as much as possible, not just relying on parents going to a safety centre to find those resources that we've written, however good they are. We need it to be in the moment. We need it to be accessible, trying new things like, can we reach parents just through mobile, or, what else could we do? We're a safety first platform. So I think, again, whilst it can feel overwhelming, if parents come in and put the right date of birth in for the child, and now we have age estimation across the platform, to access any kind of communication features and things like that, it's then safe by default. That's down to us, and that should be a platform responsibility, whether you are a platform that caters for younger kids or whether you're a 13 plus platform. It should be safe for point of entry. Then any other tools and safeguards that parents want to put in, that's because of their relationship with their kids. That should be the bit where they're like, I only want you to play for 2 hours a day, or, I want to turn off your spending ability without permissions, or whatever it is. Like, those are the rules, making it much more granular for the parents if they wish to. But it's not down to parents to make platforms safe. And it's the saying, parents know best, is something we all hear all the time, but they don't quite often. They do feel really overwhelmed. And as you say, they just get stuck in that moment, and they are much more likely to just go, you can't have it, or I'm turning it off because this thing happened. We reflected on a conversation that we had, and your response was, and then what happened? Like, did you then have a conversation about online safety, or what they'd seen, or what their experience was, and it was like, no, we just haven't talked about it again. And it's like, okay, maybe that's part of our education for parents. Is, again, something that we're very aware of, in my team, is we always say to kids that if you're being bullied, if something bad happens, go tell a parent. And then the parent's like, I don't know what to do. so, whilst we can give them the guides on the kind of basic stuff, really trying to give us much help around conversation starters, just starting with that reassurance of like, first off, take a breath yourself. Don't go into these things really heightened, because, you're going to be freaking out. Your kid just needs a bit of support right now. Also, let them have a bit of autonomy about how they want it to be responded to. If it's bullying, they might not want you wading into school and kicking off at the other parent. They might just want you to listen for a little bit and help them to be, more resilient and be empowered to deal with it. So, those are really helpful things, key bits that I think, if we can, that magic bit of how we reach parents with that, I think that's the most reassuring guidance we can give them, really keeping it simple. We know also, trying to make things, as I say, just really simple, like toggles, just keeping it straightforward so it's very obvious and people not having to move around to find things, I think would be great. But we are constantly iterating in this space. We literally have teams of people who are like constant feedback with parent groups, like what's working, is the language right, is the tooling right, what can we tweak for you? So, we never get things right the first time, and it's just about keep revisiting, and hopefully we'll hit that sweet spot. But yeah, parents, please come and have the conversation, spend time with your kids, ask them what they enjoy doing in the platform. When you think of somewhere like Roblox, where we have millions of user generated experiences, all suitable for all different age groups. We have stuff for teenagers and we have stuff for the youngest kids. So, if your child wants to play a game that might be a little bit more mature, ask them what's interesting about it. What do they want to do? Who are they going to be playing it with? Just really trying to have those conversations, just like we would, like, who are you hanging out with after school? It's the same kind of conversation, and we shouldn't be scared of it.
Yeah, and know that the worst of the worst is what gets the headlines and what people talk about, and they're all scared. And we have so much tooling and so much software. GGWP is one of the moderation softwares. You have an entire team of folks who works on the automated and detection sort of things so that you can get to the millions and millions of lines of chat and voice that are happening on a regular basis. But then depending on the different brand, and we're talking about Roblox now, but this is the case for anyone, and again, we're talking about kids, but even any brand that you're talking to outside of the worst of the worst, the illegal activity, the really, really bad stuff that they don't want on the brand, there's moments, especially for kids, of frustration. They can't build whatever they're trying to build. They're not winning the level that they're winning. No one's asking them to join their group, that sort of thing. And those aren't things that we'd usually want to automate and like automate detection on. Sometimes we can, and some really cool games are doing interesting pro-social activities to try to make that more automated and like bring some more of that in from the game design level. But I think that's another level that parents get like an easier entry point that I think parents can talk to. Like, if what would you want them to think about when they get frustrated? What do you want them to think about when they are feel loneliness because they're not connecting with the community as much, or they're not as dynamic and charismatic as they want to be online that they think they're going to be? Like, those are just regular parenting conversations that apply in the online space as much as they apply in the offline space. And sometimes kids feel more comfortable exploring in the online space. So engaging with your kid there, as well as in offline playgrounds and sports teams and that sort of thing, you have to do it in both places because they're having those experience in both areas. And thinking about it in that kind of way, and that parenting dynamic, that social learning sort of dynamic, I think that's a good way for parents to think about it too.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, we are doing some of that pro-social work. The Daniel that I mentioned, he's leading on a lot of that work as well. And as you say, for us, there's both the how parents can engage with their kids, but also how we are helping the youngest users on the platform, etc., with those positive interactions. And there's a lot we can do in that space, really, to kind of prevent it slipping into bad behavior, negative behavior. We want to keep it. We always talk about the green zone. That's where we want to keep stuff, where it's appropriate for the age and for the experience. Doesn't always have to be nice, but it's appropriate. But there is so much learning that happens in the games world. Whether it's, as you say, maintaining positive relationships, even when you don't agree, even when you're playing against each other. There's some trash talk is going to happen in some experiences, but knowing what is appropriate, what's not, when it's personal, all of those things is very nuanced. And when you are quite young, you do need guidance to help you understand. We do a lot of work around neurodivergent kids and teens in the platform, and have worked with Ambitious About Autism and Autistica and the Autism Society on a project, because we know how valuable Roblox is to those, send young people. particularly around the kind of creative side of building and so on. But we also understand that sometimes those really nuanced signals might be a bit more challenging. So helping them to understand that, what a genuine friend is, what trust looks like, how to spot if someone is trying to scam you or take abuse of your account and things like that. You have to have those conversations in different ways. So yeah, there's supporting both the community with that messaging and giving them safe opportunities to test out some of that. I think some of the education work as well, I think creeps in there. That can be really valuable. Like, it's not just punish. You did something bad, you get banned. It's like, we could perhaps deal with that a bit differently next time. What might that look like? So some of that reform type work. And then, yeah, as you say, helping parents to understand that it's not the video games are over here and family life is over there, but actually that continuity of the conversation happens across all of it. It also takes away some of those family arguments where, why are you behaving like this in a game? It's like, as you say, it's no different than if they were falling out with their peer group in the real world and you'd have a conversation, but your kid might still be kicking off because they're being excluded from their peer group in the real world, but you might feel more confident dealing with it. So I think that was brilliant advice, Joy.
Yeah. Yeah, it's such a interesting dynamic. And again, 25 years, the games have changed, the platforms have changed, some of the tool sets have thankfully changed. There's the tools out there are so much better than they were 20 years ago, even 10 years ago. So very, very happy for all of that. But kids go through the same trajectories developmentally, and it's a lot for the platforms to have to be part of that equation, but they are part of that equation. And I'm so happy that there's wonderful people with high integrity like yourself working on those teams and helping that sort of thing. So but I obviously could talk about this for days with you, hours and hours on end, but we don't want to keep everybody. Is there anything that you have coming up? I know you have some fun projects in the works that you may or may not be able to talk about, but is there anything you want to kind of plug or talk about while you still have a couple seconds?
Um, I just think watch this space. We've got some really exciting announcements coming up many exciting announcements coming up over the next couple of months. We're going to be out at a lot of events as well. So to our trust and safety colleagues, come have a conversation with me. Don't be fearful about talking about this because I'm open to it. But yeah, we're going to be out and about at loads of events. Come and chat with us and we will keep sharing our updates with you as much as we can.
Great. And where can folks find more information online about the work that you're doing and then you as a person?
So if you visit corp.roblox.com/safety, you will find all of our resources in there, both our wellbeing resources and all of our safety resources.
Awesome. And then we just find you on LinkedIn, or is there any other fun spot to
Yeah,
find you?
no, you find me on LinkedIn, Laura Higgins _.
Awesome.
Come and chat.
Awesome. Well, this has been lovely. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. And I can't wait to hang out with you in person at the next event.
Fantastic. Thank you, Joy. Always such a pleasure to chat with you.
Awesome. Thanks so much.